If your baby is crying for hours, arching their back, gassy and miserable, you're probably exhausted and ready for anything. So you reach for gas drops. They're everywhere. They say safe, gentle, even doctor recommended. But what if I told you the ingredients in that tiny bottle might be doing the opposite of what you intend? Today, we're breaking down what's really in infant gas drops and why you may just want to pass on them. I'm Tara Quintana, a board-certified family nurse practitioner and functional medicine specialist dedicated to bringing you the latest science-backed information with the goal of educating and inspiring you to not just blindly follow the masses. As always, I recommend you do your own research, and for those of you who are nerdy like me, there are lots of links in the show notes for you to geek out on. You're welcome. Today, we're talking all about infant gas. If you're a parent or a caregiver, or you know someone who is, or if you just love learning and appreciate a science-backed, feisty delivery, today's podcast is for you. A quick disclaimer, this may be a disturbing episode for some, as we are not holding back today. So if you're already super stressed out and learning about how twisted our system is in the United States with regards to transparency, amongst other things, will only make you feel more stressed, you may want to skip this episode. But if you are the type of person who wants to know what is really going on, you are going to love this. Even if you don't have kids and you are not in the market for gas drops, what you will learn today will open your eyes. Friends, when I dove into the science on this one, I was blown away. And I'm a nerd, and I feel I'm pretty informed on things. Hold on to your hats, because you are not going to believe what we uncover today. Let's get into it. Infant gas is a frequent concern for parents and caregivers, often manifesting as fussiness, crying, abdominal discomfort, and changes in bowel habits. The distress it causes for both the infant and the family leads many to seek solutions. If you know me, then you know I am always going to ask one very important question: why? The causes of infant gas are multifactorial, commonly attributed to an immature digestive system still adapting to extrauterine life, air swallowing during feeding or crying, and the fermentation of dietary components by the developing gut microbiota. Given the desire to alleviate their infant's discomfort, parents often turn to readily available over-the-counter remedies. Let's take a closer look at this one particular product. It's labeled gentle and can be given to infants up to 12 times a day. This one says safe for even the newest of newborns. Friends, don't even read the front of the package. Go straight to the ingredient list. If a product claims to be safe, and this one in particular says it is the #1 doctor recommended brand, is it? Is it really safe? If you're the type of person who likes to guess, I'd love to hear your thoughts before we get into the science, and after, if you are okay with sharing. Infant gas drop formulations, like many processed foods and pharmaceutical products, contain a mixture of inactive ingredients. We are going to be discussing 8 of these inactive ingredients today. And be sure to stay till the end, because we are going out with a bang, my friends. I saved the best for last. Oh, and this info doesn't just apply to gas drops. Check your labels. Are any of these ingredients in them? When we reach for one of these products, our infants are exposed not to a single additive in isolation, but to a cocktail of these substances simultaneously. This concurrent exposure may extend beyond a single product if the infant is also consuming other medications, fortified foods, or formulas that contain similar or different arrays of additives. The safety assessment of food additives and pharmaceutical excipients typically focuses on individual substances. Acceptable daily intakes, or ADIs, are established for single chemicals based on toxicological studies that evaluate that chemical alone. I'm going to be using this term a lot today. So when I say ADI, let's remember we're talking about acceptable daily intake. The potential for synergistic or cumulative effects arising from combined exposure to multiple chemicals, especially on the sensitive and developing systems of an infant, is largely an uninvestigated area. For example, one additive might subtly alter gut permeability, which could theoretically increase the systemic absorption or biological impact of another co-administered additive or its metabolites. Similarly, the combined effect of multiple non-nutritive preservatives on the complex ecosystem of the infant gut microbiome is not well understood. Current safety assessment paradigms may not adequately capture the potential risks associated with these real-world, multi-component exposures in infant formulations. This represents a significant knowledge gap when considering the overall safety profile of such products. The primary active ingredient in the vast majority of mainstream infant gas drops is simethicone. Simethicone, an anti-foaming agent, lessens the surface tension of gas bubbles in the GI tract, enabling them to combine into larger, more easily expelled bubbles. It is not absorbed systemically and is generally considered safe for infants. This is what we are buying the drops for, right? Keep listening. Beyond the active ingredient, these formulations contain a variety of inactive ingredients. These substances are included to enhance the product's stability, palatability, texture, and delivery. The nature and potential biological effects of these inactive ingredients, particularly in a vulnerable infant population, warrant careful scientific scrutiny. Infants represent a uniquely vulnerable population group when considering exposure to any chemical substance, including pharmaceutical additives. Their organ systems, including the liver, kidneys, gastrointestinal tract, and immune system, are still undergoing significant development and maturation. Metabolic pathways responsible for detoxifying and eliminating foreign compounds may not be fully functional, potentially leading to altered pharmacokinetics and increased susceptibility to adverse effects compared to adults. Furthermore, the early postnatal period is a critical window for the establishment of the gut microbiome and the programming of long-term health trajectories. Exposure during this time can have lasting impacts on immune function, metabolic health, even neurodevelopment. The term inactive primarily signifies that they do not possess the intended therapeutic effect of the active pharmaceutical ingredient in the formulation. It does not necessarily imply a complete lack of biological activity. This is a very important distinction. As scientific understanding evolves, it is becoming increasingly clear that some substances previously considered inert can interact with biological systems, particularly the sensitive and developing infant gut. We're talking modulation of the gut microbiota, gut barrier integrity, and also inflammatory responses. Therefore, the inactivity of these additives is relative to the drug's primary pharmacological action and does not preclude other potential biological interactions that could be significant for an infant's health. This underscores the critical need to evaluate the entire formulation of pediatric products, not just the active drug component. Let's get our list started. Do you have a pen and paper? You'll want to write this down. You will probably want to bookmark this episode and share it with everyone you know. Number 1 on the list is sorbitol. Sorbitol is a sugar alcohol used as a bulk sweetener, humectant to retain moisture, and texturizing agent in food and pharmaceutical products. You may have heard the term GRAS. The FDA has deemed sorbitol is generally recognized as safe. This is a topic for a whole other show because it is a big one. Let me know if you would like a dedicated show on this, and I will add it to the list. Sorbitol is known for its potential to cause gastrointestinal symptoms. Because it is poorly absorbed in the small intestine, it draws water into the bowel lumen, leading to an osmotic laxative effect. Subsequent fermentation by colonic bacteria produces gas. Isn't this what we're trying to fix by using these drops? Symptoms such as bloating, abdominal cramps, gas, and diarrhea seem to be dose-dependent. As with many things, these effects can vary significantly amongst individuals. Next on the list, polysorbates. Polysorbates are emulsifiers used to help mix oil and water-based ingredients and improve the consistency and stability of formulations. Polysorbates are generally permitted to be used in food and pharmaceuticals. There is a strong body of research indicating that dietary emulsifiers, including polysorbates, can significantly impact the gut environment. Studies in mice have shown that emulsifiers like P80 and carboxymethylcellulose, which also happens to be an inactive ingredient in the drops I was looking at, can promote low-grade inflammation, obesity, metabolic syndrome, and exacerbate colitis in susceptible hosts. Colitis is an autoimmune condition, and friends, if you follow me, you know the immune system is my love language. So much so that I am writing a book. Can you guess the topic? Well, I ruined the surprise, didn't I? It's about the immune system and what you need to know to get your immune system to do what it was designed to do, protect and defend, versus attacking our own tissue. I spent years of my life in fear. I was actually told there was nothing I could do. My shit genetics predisposed me to autoimmunity, and my demise was inevitable. I am so glad I didn't believe that bullshit. Writing a book takes work, but you are worth it, my friend. I'm compiling a pre-order bonus for those that sign up to be the first notified. There is a link in the show notes, and if you're watching on YouTube, I also have the link as the pinned comment. Get on the list so you are a part of the cool crowd. Seriously, pause the episode. Oh wait, where were we? Polysorbates. We know these additives can promote all kinds of health issues, and their proposed mechanisms include a reduction in the thickness of the protective mucus layer in the gut, increased adherence of bacteria to the intestinal epithelium, and an increase in the pro-inflammatory potential of the microbiota. This disruption can manifest as altered intestinal permeability or leaky gut. If you missed the 2-part deep dive into leaky gut, episodes 7 and 8, I will link it up in the show notes. Definitely a must listen. These emulsifiers have been shown to cause alterations in gut microbiota composition, a condition known as dysbiosis, and as far as I'm concerned, it's dysbiosis until proven otherwise. They cause induction of local and systemic inflammation, interfere with intestinal signaling pathways, and cause changes in bile acid metabolism, all of which can contribute to conditions like metabolic dysfunction-associated steatic liver disease, MASLD, and other inflammatory disorders. The infant gut is in a dynamic state of development with ongoing maturation of its mucosal barrier, immune system, and microbiome. This developmental phase makes infants potentially more susceptible to the adverse effects of emulsifiers observed in animal models. Interestingly, it's not just about what the baby ingests. The studies on maternal P80 intake are especially concerning as they suggest that early life exposure can have lasting negative consequences on gut health and disease susceptibility in offspring. Chronic daily oral exposure to emulsifiers like polysorbate 60 from gas drops, even at levels considered safe for general food use, could contribute to subtle ongoing gut inflammation or barrier dysfunction. Over time, such disturbances during a critical developmental window might increase the risk for conditions like allergies, autoimmune conditions, or other immune-mediated and metabolic disorders later in life. I was formula fed. What was in my formula? Was this an antecedent contributing to my development of Hashimoto's disease? Are you currently suffering with Hashimoto's? Have you been told there is nothing you can do? Are you tired of the never-ending fatigue, brain fog, anxiety, weight loss resistance? If so, I put together a free masterclass where I outline the top 3 discoveries that not only changed my life, but changed the lives of hundreds of others. If you want to gain instant access, comment down below masterclass and I will send you the link. If you're just listening to the audio, the link is in the show notes. Now, back to today's episode. The research underscores the fundamental vulnerability of infants, especially premature ones, to polysorbate toxicity due to their immature detoxification pathways. While doses in gas drops are significantly lower and subject to different pharmacokinetic processes, the general sensitivity of infants to these compounds, demonstrated by the data, suggests a need for careful evaluation of oral exposure, particularly if gut permeability is compromised, which could potentially be exacerbated by the emulsifier itself. Number 3 on the list, polyethylene glycol, PEG stearates. They function as emulsifiers and surfactants in pharmaceutical and food products. PEGs and their derivatives, including PEG stearates, are manufactured through a process called ethoxylation, which involves ethylene oxide. This process can lead to contamination of the final product with residual ethylene oxide and a byproduct, 1,4-dioxane. Ethylene oxide is classified as a human carcinogen, and 1,4-dioxane is considered likely to be carcinogenic to humans by the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA. Regulatory agencies like the FDA and EFSA, the European Food Safety Authority, as well as JECFA, Joint Expert Committee on Food Additives, establish specifications for food and pharmaceutical-grade additives to limit such impurities. The European Scientific Committee on Food, SCF, has noted concerns about these impurities in ethoxylated food additives like polysorbates and estimated potential exposures if these contaminants were present at their maximum permitted levels. The foremost concern associated with the use of PEGs and their derivatives, such as PEG stearates, in food and pharmaceutical products, especially for infants, centers on the potential presence of manufacturing residues, ethylene oxide and 1,4-dioxane. While the PEG polymer itself often exhibits low acute oral toxicity, these contaminants are classified as known or likely human carcinogens. For infants receiving daily doses of gas drops containing PEG stearate, maybe even 12 times a day, exposure matters, my friends. Chronic exposure to even trace levels of these carcinogenic impurities could pose a long-term health risk given the extended latency period often associated with cancer development and the heightened susceptibility of developing organisms. Number 4, benzoic acid. Benzoic acid and its salt, sodium benzoate, are widely used as antimicrobial preservatives in food, beverages, and pharmaceutical products, as they are seen to be effective against yeasts, molds, and some bacteria. Sodium benzoate is a common inactive ingredient in several infant gas drop brands. This one particular product shows it as the first inactive ingredient. We know that means there is more of that in there than any of the other inactive ingredients. EFSA has established an ADI of 5 milligrams per kilogram per day of benzoic acid and its salts. General reviews on food preservatives suggest they can disrupt intestinal microbiota, potentially leading to changes in intestinal permeability and liver dysfunction. I need to mention that the ADI represents a level of daily intake considered safe over a lifetime. Exceeding this level, particularly on a chronic basis during early developmental stages, raises concerns about potential subtle or long-term health effects that may not be captured in standard toxicological studies focused on overt disease. This underscores the importance of considering an infant's total benzoate exposure from all sources: food, beverages, and medications. Next up, potassium sorbate. Potassium sorbate is a potassium salt of sorbic acid and is used as a food preservative due to its antimicrobial properties, particularly against molds and yeasts. It is found as an inactive ingredient in several brands of infant gas drops. In 2015, EFSA revised the ADI for sorbic acid and potassium sorbate, establishing a temporary ADI of 3 milligrams per kilogram per day. This was a significant reduction from the previous ADI of 25 milligrams per kilogram per day. What are we going to uncover in another 10 years that may warrant a further reduction of what today would be considered safe? I would argue we need so much less of all of these chemicals. A temporary ADI often signifies that regulatory bodies require additional data to finalize the safety assessment. The substantial reduction from the previous ADI of 25 micrograms per kilograms per day was driven by data from a 2-generation reproductive toxicity study in rats, indicating that concerns related to reproductive and developmental effects prompted this re-evaluation. Remember, infants are in a critical phase of reproductive and overall physiological development, heightening the importance of scrutinizing any compound with potential reproductive or developmental flags. The findings from animal studies regarding liver inflammation and gut microbiome shifts are also relevant. While the reversibility of these effects upon cessation of exposure in mice, such as liver inflammation, interleukin-1 beta levels, and some microbiota changes, may offer some reassurance, though the context of infant gas usage must be considered. These products may be administered daily, up to 12 times per day, for extended periods, potentially weeks or even months. Such chronic exposure in infants would not allow for the washout periods observed in the animal study, potentially leading to sustained low-grade inflammation or microbiome disturbances during a critical developmental window. The specific changes to the microbiome, such as decreased overall diversity, alterations in specific microbes, or an altered short-chain fatty acid profile, need to be understood for their functional impact on infant gut health, immune programming, and nutrient absorption. Quick side note, short-chain fatty acids are the metabolites of our microbiome. Think butyrate, acetate, and propionate. We did a whole show with Dr. Heather Zwicky, a leading immunologist, episode 20 if you missed it. Such a necessary and scientifically interesting conversation. While the reversibility in animal models is a positive indicator, the potential for ongoing physiological stress from chronic daily dosing in infants means these findings remain pertinent. Number 5, silicon dioxide. Silicon dioxide, also known as silica, is used in food and pharmaceutical products primarily as an anti-caking agent to prevent powders from clumping, as a flow agent to improve handling, and sometimes as a carrier for other substances. Silicon dioxide is an approved food additive. Am I the only one that doesn't want all of these additives? Let me know in the comments. In a 2024 reevaluation, the EFSA reaffirmed its safety for use in food for all population groups, including infants below 16 weeks of age. Due to limitations in the available data, the EFSA did not establish a numerical ADI, but instead used a margin of exposure approach. The FDA also considers silicon dioxide as GRAS. The systemic bioavailability of orally ingested silicon dioxide in humans is considered to be very low. However, precise quantification of its absorption into the body is challenging due to a lack of appropriate data. This assessment is particularly relevant as it specifically addresses the nanoscale characteristics of silicon dioxide, which is an important consideration given that many food-grade silica products can exist in or contain nano-sized particles. Silicon dioxide is often manufactured from natural mineral sources, which can inherently contain varying levels of heavy metals like lead, mercury, and arsenic, as well as aluminum. These elements are known toxicants with developing infants, being particularly vulnerable to their adverse effects, which can include neurodevelopmental harm. I thought we were just dealing with gas. The next ingredient we will be talking about today is sucralose. And a warning, I have very strong opinions about this one. Sucralose is an artificial sweetener devoid of any nutrients. It is approximately 600 times sweeter than sucrose, sugar, and used to improve palatability without adding calories. The FDA has deemed sucralose is also GRAS. Seriously, if you want a dedicated episode, you only need to ask, and I will deliver. Give me a thumbs up if you love this kind of conversation. Some studies indicate that sucralose can lead to an increase in certain bacterial groups, such as proteobacteria and Escherichia coli, and enriched genes associated with bacterial pro-inflammatory mediators. Maternal sucralose consumption during pregnancy and lactation in mouse models has been shown to alter the gut microbiota of their offspring, characterized by an increase in firmicutes and a decrease in Akkermansia eosinophilia. Akkermansia is a keystone player with our gut integrity. Our gut integrity is vitally important for our overall health and wellness. I've done multiple stool tests on myself. The very first one showed below detectable levels of Akkermansia. Was that a contributing factor to my development of autoimmune disorders? A study published in Frontiers in Nutrition showed that even very low doses of sucralose, 0.0003 milligrams per milliliter, significantly below the ADI, administered to mice for 16 weeks, resulted in significant alterations to the gut microbiota. These changes included a reduction in the abundance of potentially beneficial bacteria such as Lactoclostridium and Lactospirochaete, and an increase in Alobaculum, a genus that has been positively correlated with diabetes in some contexts. Furthermore, increases in potential pathogens like Tenisabaculum, Rugeria, and Staphylococcus were observed in various segments of the gut. In addition to microbiome changes, sucralose has been linked to an increase in bacterial pro-inflammatory mediators and hepatic pro-inflammatory gene expression. Maternal sucralose intake in mice was associated with higher levels of pro-inflammatory cytokines in their offspring. Damage to the intestinal barrier and clusters of lymphocytes in the ileum and colon of mice showed inflammation. Some human studies have suggested that sucralose consumption may lead to alterations in glucose and insulin levels. Isn't that interesting? We take the artificial no-calorie sweetener believing we are helping our metabolic processes. What do you think? Findings from animal studies, particularly those demonstrating effects at very low doses, raise important questions regarding the established ADI for sucralose when applied to the infant population. I want to state that ADIs are typically derived from animal studies, with safety for uncertainty factors applied to account for interspecies differences and human variability. However, infants possess lower body weights, meaning that even small absolute amounts of an additive can result in a higher dose per kilogram of body weight. Coupled with a developing gastrointestinal tract and immature metabolic systems, infants may exhibit increased sensitivity compared to adults. If adverse effects such as gut microbiome disruption and intestinal barrier damage are observed at sucralose doses far below the ADI in animal models, it warrants careful consideration of whether the current ADI is sufficiently protective for infants, especially those receiving chronic daily exposure, up to 12 times per day, through medications like gas drops. My friends, we are here. We are at the final inactive ingredient we are dissecting. I do believe I saved the best for last. What do you think? Natural flavors. Natural flavors on ingredient labels indicate substances added to enhance or change a product's taste. This definition allows for flavors derived from a wide array of natural raw materials, including spices, fruits or fruit juice, vegetable or vegetable juice, edible yeast, herbs, bark, buds, root, leaves, or similar plant material, meat, seafood, poultry, eggs, dairy products, or fermentation products thereof. The significant function in food must be flavoring rather than nutritional. Notably, flavors derived from genetically modified organisms, GMOs, can be labeled as natural in the United States. Did you hear that? GMO is okay with the United States and considered natural? What? Furthermore, U.S. regulations permit chemical transformations of natural flavor precursors using inorganic catalysts, while still allowing the resulting flavor to be designated as natural. European regulation provides a more restrictive definition for natural flavoring substances. To be labeled as natural in the EU, a flavor must be obtained from material of vegetable, animal, or microbiological origin by appropriate physical, enzymatic, or microbiological processes. The flavor substance must correspond to substances that are naturally present and have been identified in nature. Crucially, EU regulations emphasize that natural flavors should be produced using traditional food preparation processes like heating, distillation, fermentation, and extraction. The use of synthetic or inorganic catalysts for chemical transformations is generally not permitted for flavors to be labeled natural in the EU. Why is it that the United States is so behind on this? Natural flavors are rarely single chemical compounds. Instead, they are typically complex mixtures formulated by flavor chemists and can contain numerous individual components to achieve a desired taste profile. The manufacturing and stabilization of natural flavor formulations often involve the use of solvents for extraction, carriers to dilute or standardize the flavor, emulsifiers, and preservatives. These are sometimes referred to as incidental additives and may not be explicitly declared on the final product label if present below certain levels or if considered processing aids. Extraction processes themselves can be complex and involve chemical methods. A significant issue with natural flavors is the lack of transparency regarding their specific chemical composition on product labels. The generic term natural flavors is permitted, and manufacturers are generally not required to list the individual flavoring substances or incidental additives that make up the blend. This is such bullshit. Makes me think of the term fragrance, which means what exactly? This can pose challenges for consumers, particularly those with food allergies, sensitivities, or specific dietary restrictions, as potentially problematic substances may be hidden within the natural flavor designation. The FEMA, Flavor and Extract Manufacturers Association, GRAS program, which involves a panel of experts reviewing the safety of flavoring substances, allows for many flavor ingredients to be self-declared as GRAS by manufacturers, which can lead direct FDA pre-market approval and systematic collection of safety data for all components. The lack of disclosure of the specific chemical constituents or incidental additives within a natural flavor blend means that parents and healthcare providers cannot make a fully informed assessment of all potential exposures or identify potential allergens. The lack of transparency is a primary concern when these flavors are included in products intended for vulnerable infants. While the flavors themselves are used in small quantities, the unknown nature of all components within the blend raises questions, particularly for infants with sensitivities or those whose parents wish to avoid certain types of synthetic chemicals or additives. If you liked this conversation, you're really gonna love the deep dive we did on Manuka honey. If you are not currently consuming Manuka honey, you may want to consider adding it to your daily routine. I put that video up on the screen and I will see you over there.